The cathedral doors thundered open just as the Baron's fingers bruised her arm. "Answer him!" Baron Spencer Houghton hissed between smiling teeth. "Or I will make certain your family pays for your hesitation." The priest's voice trembled over the open Bible. "Do you, Miss Eve Brown, take this man?" The doors crashed against stone again. A gust of winter air swept down the aisle, scattering candle flames and whispers alike. Every noble head turned. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, black military coat heavy with silver braiding and medals that caught the light like cold stars. His presence did not request attention. It commanded it. One by one, silk skirts rustled and velvet knees struck marble. "The Grand Duke," someone breathed. Eve had never seen him before. But the Baron had. Spencer's grip loosened instantly. The Duke walked forward with measured steps, boots striking the stone like a verdict. His dark hair was swept back from a face carved in restraint. Gray eyes, steady, assessing, moved first to the altar, then to the bride trembling beneath her veil. "She's coming with me." 3 words, not loud, not shouted, and yet they altered the air itself. The priest swallowed. "Your Grace, you are in the midst of an unlawful ceremony." The Duke did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Spencer forced a laugh. "Unlawful? I have contracts. Debts cleared. The girl's father signed." "You purchased livestock," the Duke replied evenly. "You did not secure a lawful bride." A murmur rippled through the congregation. Eve's heartbeat roared in her ears. "Purchased. Yes, that was the word." 3 weeks earlier, she had stood barefoot on the warped wooden floor of their village cottage when her father confessed what he had done. "They'll take the house," he had slurred. "Your sister needs medicine. I've arranged it, Eve." Arranged it. Baron Spencer Houghton would clear the debts, pay for Lily's treatments, provide an annual allowance. In exchange, he would have Eve. Her mother had pulled the corset tighter that morning, ignoring the bruises blooming beneath pale skin. "This dress costs more than our entire village," she had whispered sharply. "Do not disgrace it with tears." Now, standing at the altar, Eve felt the silk cut into her ribs like a reminder. The Duke reached into his coat and produced a sealed document. 23 years ago, he said calmly, Jonathan Brown entered into a blood oath with the crown. The firstborn daughter of his line is placed under ducal protection. She cannot be bartered or wed without my consent. Spencer's face turned a mottled red. This is absurd. The man is a drunk. He remembers nothing of oaths. "I do," the Duke replied. Silence fell heavy and absolute. Eve's gaze lifted to him. His eyes found hers fully for the first time, not appraising, not possessive, measuring, as if weighing her will. "As Grand Duke Dominic Wallace," he continued, "I nullify this ceremony." Gasps echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Spencer's voice cracked. "You cannot simply steal what I've lawfully acquired." The Duke's expression cooled further. "She is not property." The word hung in the air. Property. Eve felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Anger. The Duke stepped closer. "Baron Houghton," he said quietly, "you will be reimbursed for any legitimate financial exchanges. You will not contest this, and you will not contact this woman again." "And if I do?" The Duke's gaze hardened into something lethal. "Then you will discover how much power I am capable of exercising." The Baron faltered. Even he understood the hierarchy of predators. The Duke extended his hand to Eve. "Come." It was not gentle, but neither was it cruel. Eve stared at the gloved hand. Her family, the debts, Lily's coughing in the night, the tower the Baron had prepared for her. "You will not leave them destitute," she whispered. The Duke leaned slightly closer so only she could hear. "Your sister will have the finest physicians in the realm. Your brother will attend proper schooling. Your parents will never sell another child." His voice did not waver. "I always keep my promises." The cathedral watched, waiting. Eve placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady. He led her down the aisle where moments before she had walked toward ruin. Whispers followed. The poor girl saved by a duke, or claimed by one. Outside, a black carriage waited, 6 midnight horses stamping in the frost. The Duke assisted her inside without flourish. When the door shut, the cathedral vanished. Eve pulled off her veil. "Where are you taking me?" "To Wallace Keep." His tone was calm. "You are under my protection now." "Protection," she echoed bitterly. "That sounds suspiciously like possession." A faint shadow crossed his expression. "I do not break women, Miss Brown." "But you command armies." "Yes. And what happens when I defy you?" A pause. His gaze held hers evenly. Then we will discover whether you were meant to be protected or whether you were meant to become dangerous. The carriage lurched forward. The cathedral faded behind them. Eve pressed her palm to the cold glass as her old life disappeared into winter mist. She had been sold. Now she had been claimed. But by what? Savior, strategist, or something far more complicated. Wallace Keep did not resemble a home. It rose from the winter hills like a fortress carved from storm clouds. Stone walls crowned with iron, watchtowers piercing the sky, guards posted at every gate. Torches flickered against the dusk as the Duke's carriage passed through the first set of iron doors. Eve swallowed. A prison, she murmured. Security, Dominic corrected without looking at her. The carriage rolled into a vast courtyard where servants stood in 2 silent rows. As soon as he stepped down, they bowed in perfect unison. The power of it pressed against her ribs more tightly than her corset ever had. He offered his hand again. She took it. "This is Miss Eve Brown," he announced evenly. "She is under my direct protection. Any harm to her will be treated as harm to me." A ripple of understanding passed through the staff. Protection, or ownership. Eve could not yet tell the difference. An older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwood, Your Grace." "The Eastern Wing is prepared?" "Yes, Your Grace." Eastern Wing, not a tower, not a dungeon, but not freedom either. Eve was led through corridors lined with ancestral portraits. Men in military regalia, women in silk gowns with unreadable expressions. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and cedar. Her rooms were larger than her family's entire cottage. A fire already burned in the hearth. A bath steamed behind a folding screen. Dresses, dozens of them, hung in a polished wardrobe. Everything fit, just like the Baron's gown had. "You had me measured," she said quietly. Dominic did not deny it. "You will need clothing appropriate to your position." "My position?" she asked. He met her gaze steadily. "That depends on what you choose to become." A strange answer. He stepped back toward the door. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow your education begins." "Education?" "If you are to stand beneath my protection, you must understand the world that will attempt to dismantle you." The door closed softly behind him. Eve stood alone in silken silence. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt unsettled. The next morning, she was summoned to the library. It stretched 2 stories high, shelves climbing toward painted ceilings, ladders rolled along rails. Sunlight streamed across polished floors. Dominic sat behind a heavy oak desk. He did not rise when she entered. "Sit." She did. "First rule," he began calmly. "You address me as Your Grace in public. In private, Dominic." She hesitated, then tried it softly. "Dominic." The sound of his name on her tongue altered something in his expression. Barely perceptible. "Second," he continued, "you begin lessons immediately. Law, economics, political strategy. You will understand how contracts bind, how alliances fracture, and how reputations are destroyed. I can read and write. Village ledgers and prayer books are not enough." His tone was firm, not unkind. "You nearly signed your life away yesterday because you did not know you had legal recourse." The truth struck hard. "You could have told me sooner," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "But you needed to see the edge of the cliff to understand why you must learn to build your own railings." Her hands curled in her lap. "And when I am educated?" she asked. "When I understand your world?" He leaned back slightly. "Then you will never again rely on someone else's mercy." The words were quiet, but deliberate. Something in her chest shifted. For the first time in her life, someone was not instructing her how to endure. He was instructing her how to survive. A parade of tutors began that afternoon. A magistrate who dissected legal precedent. A retired general who explained military positioning. A sharp-tongued lady who corrected her posture and diction without mercy. It was exhausting, humbling, infuriating, and intoxicating. At dinner, Dominic questioned her conclusions, challenged her logic, forced her to defend her thoughts as though she were already standing before Parliament. "You hesitate," he observed one evening. "You stare as though you are testing me." "I am." "Why?" His gaze did not soften. "Because one day others will." Weeks passed. Her mind sharpened. Her fear did not vanish, but it transformed. And yet, beneath the discipline and structure, something else lingered. The way his voice lowered when correcting her. The way he watched her when he thought she did not notice. The way he never once touched her without invitation. She was no longer in a tower, but she was undeniably within his walls. And she had yet to decide whether those walls were protection or the beginning of another cage. Spring arrived at Wallace Keep with deceptive softness. The frost melted from the gardens, roses were pruned, invitations began arriving in thick cream envelopes sealed with wax crests. Society had awakened, and society was watching. "You cannot remain hidden forever," Mrs. Blackwood informed her one morning while adjusting the fall of a pale blue gown. "The nobility are curious." Curious. Eve had learned what that word meant in aristocratic circles. Suspicious, calculating, hungry. The Duke entered without announcement, gloved hands clasped behind his back. His presence altered the air as always. "There is a luncheon at Lady Ashcombe's estate," he said. "You will attend." "Alone?" Eve asked carefully. "With Mrs. Blackwood, I will not be present." A test. Her chin lifted slightly. "You wish to see how I fare without your shadow. I wish to see how they behave without fearing my immediate response." The distinction was subtle, but meaningful. The Ashcombe manor glittered with chandeliers and polished floors. Silk rustled, fans fluttered, laughter carried sharp edges. Conversation stalled when she entered, the girl from the altar, the Duke's mysterious ward. His mistress? His pawn? Lady Ashcombe, a woman with pearls draped like armor, smiled thinly. "Miss Brown, how fortunate for you that His Grace intervened so dramatically." "Fortunate." Eve met her gaze calmly. "Fortune had little to do with it, my lady. Legal standing did." A ripple of interest. Lady Penhurst leaned closer. "And what standing might that be?" "The kind that prevents a woman from being sold as settlement for a man's debts." Silence. Then laughter, too bright. "How modern," someone murmured. They circled her gently at first. Questions wrapped in courtesy. "Does the Duke dine with you nightly? Are your apartments comfortable? How generous he must be to clothe you so well." Every inquiry sought the same answer. "What are you to him?" Eve chose her words carefully. "I'm under his protection, nothing more, nothing less." A lie, or perhaps a shield, because lately, protection had begun to feel dangerously like something warmer. As the luncheon progressed, whispers thickened. "The Baron has been seen in London. They say he contests the decree. He claims coercion." Coercion. The word chilled her more than winter had. When she returned to Wallace Keep, Dominic awaited her in the library. "Well?" he asked. They smiled, she replied. They measured, they speculated. "And you?" "I survived." A faint curve touched his mouth. "You did more than that. News travels quickly." She stiffened. "What news?" "That you corrected Lady Penhurst on inheritance law." Eve flushed. She was wrong. She is rarely told so. He stepped closer. "Spencer has begun spreading rumors." Her spine straightened. "Of what nature?" "That you are kept here against your will." The word struck deeper than she expected. "And are you?" he asked quietly. The question hung between them. She could have said yes. He would have loosened the gates. Instead, she held his gaze. "No." The answer surprised even her. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something like relief. "Then we will let society whisper," he said. "Whispers fade. Evidence does not." But outside those stone walls, the Baron's influence crept like smoke. Letters began arriving for servants, unsigned, suggesting scandal. Merchants hesitated to deliver goods. A minor magistrate questioned the legality of the blood oath. Spencer was tightening the trap, not through violence, through reputation, and reputation, Eve was learning, could destroy faster than any blade. That night, as rain lashed the windows, she stood alone in the gallery overlooking the courtyard. She had escaped one altar, but she was stepping onto another battlefield, and this one required far sharper weapons than courage. The rain did not cease for 3 days. It battered the towers of Wallace Keep as though determined to breach what Spencer could not. On the 4th evening, Dominic summoned Eve to the war room. Not the library, not the dining chamber, the war room. Maps stretched across a long oak table, inked borders, marked trade routes, pinned reports weighted with brass seals. Candlelight flickered against his stern profile. He did not look up when she entered. "They questioned your status in Parliament today," he said. Eve folded her hands before her. "And what did you answer?" "That you are under my protection." A pause. "And nothing more?" His jaw tightened faintly. That was sufficient. She studied him carefully. "Spencer wants you provoked." "Yes." "And are you?" A muscle flickered in his cheek. "Constantly." For the first time she saw it. Not the composed Duke, not the feared military commander, but the man straining against fury. "They will not stop at whispers," he continued. "He is seeking to undermine my authority by questioning my judgment." By questioning me, she corrected softly. Their eyes met. Yes. The word was not defensive. It was honest. Eve stepped closer to the table. Then perhaps we stop reacting. His brows lifted slightly. Explain. You taught me that power lies in anticipation. If he wishes to paint me as helpless, then I must be seen as capable. If he calls you coercive, then you must be seen as restrained. You propose appearing together in public. I propose appearing balanced. Silence stretched. The rain softened against the stone. You are asking me to place you in greater scrutiny, he said at last. I am asking you not to hide me. The words landed heavier than she intended. Something shifted behind his eyes. You think I hide you? I think you fear losing another woman to Spencer's cruelty. The air went still. She had stepped too close to the wound. Dominic's hands braced against the table. I will not apologize for caution. I am not asking for apology, she replied gently. I am asking for trust. The candle flame flickered between them. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he moved around the table, stopped before her, close enough that she could see the faint scar near his collarbone, close enough to feel the warmth beneath his coat. I lost my wife because I misjudged my enemy, he said quietly. I thought I could shield her with soldiers and stone walls. I was wrong. His voice did not tremble, but something in it fractured. I will not gamble with your life. Eve's breath softened. You are not gambling, she said. You are teaching me to stand beside you. His gaze dropped briefly to her hands. When he spoke again, his voice had lowered. You stood before Spencer in a room full of nobles and did not flinch. You were behind me. And if I were not, she swallowed, I would still speak. The answer surprised them both. Dominic exhaled slowly. Then unexpectedly he removed one of the rings from his gloved hand, an onyx seal bearing the Wallace crest. He placed it in her palm. This will grant you authority to speak in my name within the duchy. Her breath caught. That is no small trust. No, he agreed, it is not. Their fingers brushed as he released it, a fleeting touch, yet charged. Next week, he continued, regaining composure, we attend the spring assembly together. Not as ward and guardian, not as roomer and protector, but as something visibly aligned. The rain eased outside, and for the first time since the cathedral, Eve felt not merely rescued, but chosen. The spring assembly glittered like a battlefield disguised in silk. Crystal chandeliers cascaded light across polished marble. Nobles drifted through the ballroom in embroidered waistcoats and gowns heavy with pearls. Music floated above low conversation, pleasant, elegant, lethal. Eve entered on Dominic's arm, not behind him, not trailing. Beside him, the subtle shift did not go unnoticed. Fans paused mid-flutter, conversation stilled just long enough to measure. She wore silver tonight, unmistakably ducal colors. The onyx Wallace ring rested against her gloved finger. Power, borrowed, or perhaps slowly becoming her own. Dominic inclined his head to greetings, his posture impeccable, yet Eve felt the faint tension in his arm. He will be here, he murmured. I know. Spencer arrived an hour later, not loudly, but deliberately. He moved through the crowd with a brittle smile, his once florid complexion drawn thinner. When his gaze landed on Eve, it sharpened with something dangerous. He did not approach her first. He approached Dominic. Your Grace, Spencer said smoothly. How admirable the spectacle you've created. Dominic did not blink. Careful. Oh, I am. I've learned that the hard way. His eyes slid to Eve. Miss Brown. Baron. Her voice held. He leaned slightly closer. Do you sleep well at Wallace Keep? A whisper meant only for her. Very. Strange. I would have thought stone walls and locked gates might feel confining. Dominic shifted, but Eve subtly tightened her grip on his arm. Let me. You mistake discipline for imprisonment, she replied calmly. I suppose that confusion is common among men who cannot tell the difference between authority and cruelty. A nearby lord choked on his wine. Spencer's jaw tightened. He smiled wider. Ah, education suits you, and truth unsettles you. For a fleeting moment, his composure fractured. Then he stepped back. Enjoy your evening, he said lightly, while it lasts. The music resumed, but Eve felt it. Something altered beneath the surface. Later, as she moved through the gallery to take air, she heard voices drifting from behind a half-closed study door. Spencer's voice. And the physician? Disposed of, another man answered. Eve's blood ran cold. He suspected too much, the stranger continued. Good, Spencer said. The less anyone knows about Catherine's condition before the ambush, the better. Catherine, Dominic's wife. Eve's breath caught, and if the Duke ever learned she was already weakened before the attack, he will learn nothing, Spencer snapped. The carriage was intercepted as planned. Bandits were blamed, and no one questions a grieving widower. Footsteps shifted. Eve slipped backward into shadow just before the door opened. Her heart pounded violently. Catherine had not simply been ambushed. She had been unwell, perhaps poisoned, perhaps deliberately weakened. The ambush had not been mere jealousy. It had been strategy. Spencer had orchestrated it all, and Dominic believed he had failed his wife. Eve's hand trembled as she pressed it to her chest. This was not rumor. This was murder. When she returned to the ballroom, Dominic immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? He asked quietly. She forced calm into her voice. Nothing, yet. But inside a terrible understanding was forming. Spencer did not merely want revenge. He had always been willing to kill for power. And if Catherine had been part of a larger scheme, then Eve was not merely an inconvenience. She was the next move on his board. The music swelled again, and across the room Spencer watched her, as if he knew she had heard something she was never meant to hear. Eve did not sleep. Catherine's name echoed through her mind long after the last carriage departed the spring assembly. Poison, ambush, bandits as convenient fiction. Dominic believed his wife had died because he had failed to guard her closely enough. But what if he had been deceived from the beginning? At dawn, Eve stood before the tall windows of the eastern gallery, watching mist coil over the gardens. Footsteps approached. Dominic, you left the ballroom early, he observed quietly. So did you. He joined her at the window. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned. If Spencer orchestrated Catherine's death, his body went utterly still. Would you want to know? The air shifted. What are you implying? His voice was calm. Too calm. I overheard him last night, she said carefully. He spoke of a physician, of Catherine's condition before the ambush. Dominic's jaw tightened slowly like steel under strain. She was fatigued that week, he admitted. The court physician believed it to be exhaustion. Did she trust him? She had no reason not to. Eve swallowed. And if he was bribed? The silence that followed was suffocating. Dominic stepped back as if struck. No. But doubt flickered. He said the physician was disposed of, Eve continued softly, and that no one would question a grieving widower. His hands curled into fists. Why did you not tell me immediately? Because I wanted to be certain, she replied, refusing to flinch. And because you deserved to hear it without an audience. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned sharply toward his desk. I will reopen the investigation. His voice was clipped now, military, controlled fury. Discreetly, Eve added. If Spencer suspects we know, he will move faster. Dominic looked at her, truly looked at her. You are asking me to pretend ignorance. I'm asking you to think strategically. A breath. Then another. You are right, he said at last. The admission cost him. By afternoon, messengers were dispatched quietly, old records retrieved, servants questioned under oath. But Spencer did not wait idly. 2 nights later, a carriage returning from the village was overturned on the southern road. The driver, a loyal Dutchy man, was found beaten, alive, but shaken. Bandits, the report claimed. Dominic read it in silence. Not bandits, Eve said quietly. No, he agreed. The pattern was unmistakable now. Spencer was pressing. Testing defenses. Escalating. You will not leave the keep, Dominic said firmly. Eve lifted her chin. I am not afraid. I am. The honesty startled her. I will not lose another woman to him, he said. The words were not a command. They were a confession. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Inside, something darker gathered. If Catherine had been poisoned, if the ambush had been staged, then Spencer was capable of far more than social humiliation. He was capable of calculated murder. And now he knew Eve was not merely protected. She was learning, which made her dangerous. And dangerous women did not survive easily in games played by ruthless men. The storm that had threatened for days finally broke over Wallace Keep. Lightning split the sky above the towers, illuminating stone walls that had withstood siege and rebellion, but not grief. Dominic had not slept. Eve knew because she had not either. The reopened investigation had already yielded quiet irregularities, records altered, dates inconsistent. The physician who attended Catherine had indeed left court abruptly, vanished into private practice in the north. No forwarding address. Too convenient, too clean. Dominic stood alone in the war gallery, rain streaking the tall windows behind him. You should rest, Eve said softly from the doorway. I will rest when Spencer is in chains. His tone was iron, but exhaustion shadowed his eyes. She stepped further into the room. This is no longer only about me, she said gently, or reputation. It is about Catherine. At her name, something in him hardened. You should not involve yourself in ghosts. She was not a ghost, she was your wife. His jaw tightened. And you are under my protection. That is my priority. There it was again. Protection, a shield, or a barrier. You speak of me as though I am fragile glass, she said quietly. Because Spencer breaks what he cannot control. And so do you, she answered before she could stop herself. Silence struck like a blow. Dominic's head turned slowly. I beg your pardon? You keep me informed but not included, she continued, pulse racing. You investigate alone. You decide alone. You fight alone. To keep you safe. To keep yourself from feeling. The accusation hung heavy. Rain battered the windows. His expression shifted. Not anger, but something far more vulnerable. You think this is about control? He asked. I think you are afraid to let anyone stand beside you again. The truth in it was raw. Dominic stepped closer. You want honesty? His voice lowered. I am terrified. The admission was quiet, but seismic. I watched Catherine's carriage burn in the mud while I stood powerless. I held her hand as she died, believing I had failed her. Do you imagine I will risk that again? Eve's anger softened. I am not Catherine, she whispered. I know. Then stop treating me like her shadow. He looked at her then, not as ward, not as responsibility, as a woman, strong, fierce, standing her ground in the heart of a storm. You heard him speak of her, he said slowly, and you came to me with it. Yes. You could have kept it, used it, tested me. I am not Spencer. A faint broken sound escaped him, half laugh, half breath. No, you are not. Lightning flashed. For a suspended moment, the space between them felt electric. You are not glass, he said quietly. You are fire. Her breath faltered. Then let me burn beside you, she replied. His hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was barely there, but it shattered something guarded between them. I do not know how to love without fearing loss, he confessed. Then learn, she whispered. The thunder rolled again, and in that charged silence they stood closer than ever before. Yet the storm outside was nothing compared to the one building within their hearts, because loving him meant standing in the path of a man who had already killed once, and Spencer was not finished. The summons arrived at dusk, not sealed with a crest, not delivered by a liveried footman. It was carried by a stable boy, mud-streaked, trembling. They've taken him, the boy gasped. Your brother, miss. Riders intercepted the school carriage an hour past. They left this. A ring fell into Eve's palm. Thomas's signet, cracked down the center. Dominic was beside her before she could breathe. Where? He demanded. Old Quarry Road, the boy whispered. Eve's blood turned to ice. Spencer. No more whispers. No more subtle sabotage. He had escalated. Dominic's expression became something she had never seen before, cold beyond fury. He wants you, he said quietly. Yes. And he thinks I will choose strategy over blood. Eve met his gaze steadily. Will you? His jaw clenched. I will choose both. Within minutes, riders assembled in the courtyard. Rain threatened again, heavy clouds pressing low over the hills. You will remain here, Dominic ordered. No. His eyes flashed. This is not debate. It is precisely debate, she replied, stepping forward. He will not reveal himself unless I appear. You are not bait. I am leverage, she said evenly, and you taught me how to use it. Silence stretched between them. I will not lose you, he said. You will lose more if he believes you weak. The words hurt to say, but they were true. Dominic exhaled slowly. Fine. You ride beside me. You do not dismount unless I give word. They rode under a sky that threatened violence. The quarry loomed ahead, jagged rock walls casting long shadows and fading light. A single lantern burned below. Spencer stood waiting. Thomas knelt several yards away, bound but alive. Relief nearly buckled her knees. Touching, Spencer called. The Duke arrives with his prize. Dominic's voice was lethal calm. Release the boy. And surrender her? Spencer smiled thinly. You mistake me. Eve dismounted before Dominic could stop her. Spencer, she said clearly, you want me. His eyes gleamed. I want justice. You want control, she corrected, and you lost it. Wind whipped her cloak. You killed Catherine, she said loudly. The word struck like a gunshot. Dominic stiffened. Spencer's smile faltered, only for a fraction of a second. Careful, he warned. You poisoned her physician. You orchestrated the ambush. Dominic's men shifted, hands tightening on swords. Spencer's mask cracked. You think you understand this game? He snapped. I understand enough, she replied. You fear what you cannot own. Rage twisted his face. Take the boy, he barked suddenly to his men, and bring her. But Dominic had anticipated the move. Steel rang in the night. Chaos erupted, and in the confusion Spencer's eyes locked onto Eve, not with calculation now, but with desperation. He had nothing left but destruction, and this time he intended to take something from Dominic that could never be restored. Steel clashed against stone. Rain began to fall. Thomas was dragged backward, struggling, but alive. Dominic's men intercepted swiftly, blades flashing in disciplined formation. Spencer did not retreat. He lunged, not toward Dominic, toward Eve. You should have been mine, he roared. The madness in his eyes was no longer hidden behind silk civility. It was raw, unraveling. Eve did not step back. She stepped aside, just as Dominic had trained her. Spencer's momentum faltered on wet gravel. His blade sliced air where her throat had been a heartbeat earlier. Dominic was on him instantly. The force of the collision drove Spencer to his knees. The Duke's sword pressed cold against his half-brother's throat. For Catherine, Dominic said quietly. Spencer laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. She was weak, he spat. Soft. She would have bored you eventually, just as this one will. Dominic's grip tightened. Eve stepped forward, rain soaking through silk and wool. No, she said clearly. You mistook kindness for weakness, just as you mistook me. Spencer's gaze flicked to her, hatred burning bright. You think you've won? Society will whisper. They will always whisper. Eve lifted her chin, then let them. Dominic's voice carried over the rain. Baron Spencer Houghton, you are hereby charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and the poisoning of a ducal household physician. You will stand trial before the crown. For the first time, fear entered Spencer's eyes. Chains replaced swords. The quarry fell silent except for the storm. Thomas was freed and pulled into Eve's arms. He clung to her, shaking. I thought he would kill you, he whispered. He will not touch us again, she said softly. Dominic watched her, watched the way she soothed her brother, the way she stood without trembling despite the chaos. Not fragile, not property. Fire. Weeks later, the royal court gathered beneath vaulted ceilings of gold and crimson. The trial was swift. Evidence once hidden surfaced under scrutiny. Bribed records. Disappeared servants. The physician's trail traced at last to Spencer's accounts. The verdict was unanimous. Exile. Titles stripped. Fortune seized. Spencer was led away not in rage but in silence. The whispers shifted. No longer about scandal, but about strength. And on the evening following the crown's decree, Dominic requested Eve's presence in the great hall of Wallace Keep. Candles lined the long chamber. No audience, no spectacle. He stood before the ancestral crest, not as Grand Duke, as Dominic. I have spent my life commanding armies, he said quietly. But I have never mastered the courage required to ask this. Eve's heart stilled. I do not offer you protection, he continued. You no longer require it. A faint smile touched her lips. I offer partnership. He stepped closer. I love you. Not because I saved you. Not because you need me. But because you stood beside me when I was weakest and reminded me I am more than grief. He knelt. Not before court. Not before Parliament. Before her. Eve Brown, will you choose me? Tears burned her eyes, but she did not look away. Yes. The word was steady, certain. When they married in the gardens weeks later, there were no shadows at the gate. No interruptions. Only sunlight threading through roses. Eve walked toward him not as sacrifice, not as ward, but as equal. And when Dominic lifted her hand before assembled nobles and said, This is my wife, there was no possessiveness in the words, only pride. She had not been rescued. She had risen, and beside her stood a duke who had learned that love was not control. It was trust. As twilight settled over Wallace Keep, Eve stood on the balcony where she once questioned her fate. Dominic joined her, arms wrapping around her waist. No more cages, he murmured. No more ghosts, she replied. Below them, torches burned warm against stone that once felt like prison walls. Now it was home. And in the quiet certainty of his embrace, Eve understood something she had once believed impossible. She had not been taken from the altar. She had chosen her own destiny.